everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Welcome back to the ULIN Consulting Podcast. Let's talk everyday equity at the justice table, from add-on to all-in, equity that inspires change. And of course, you all know I'm Anika Farrell, founder and CEO of ULIN Consulting LLC and this podcast. And today we're going to be diving into conversations about onboarding with equity being embedded and how to set the tone from day one. And today we have with us Analia Galloway. She is the Director of Recruitment at the Auburn School District. Thank you so much for being here, Analia.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to get started right away. And one question that I have for you as we think about onboarding with equity is, what can onboarding with equity being embedded look like for an organization? How do we build that into the culture and the fabric of an organization on day one?
I think it's a big shift for most organizations. And what that means is it goes from being a checklist, which is how it is often treated, to an actual relationship, right? It's more than just, I need you to do these trainings, here are your keys. It should become an experience where the staff that you're hiring are feeling the mission and vision of your organization and are feeling like they're being seen and heard and valued as a person coming into this organization. So I feel like that would be being intentional about representation, who's leading meetings, who's facilitating trainings, whose voices are we centering? That means making space for identity, for culture, and belonging from the get-go, right? And then giving people not just the what of your, for us, our district, for others, their organization, but why. Like, why are we doing these things? And I think more than anything, making it evident, and that's with being thoughtful and being purposeful with your actions, that we're not just giving lip service, right? It's not just statements, that we are fully invested in making sure that you feel like you are part of the team.
I totally agree with you. And from what I hear you saying is making sure that an organization is intentional about the way that the employee feels and that experience from day one. I know previously, being a recruitment coordinator, I led the introductory welcoming sessions, if you will, the HR welcoming sessions. And one thing that I always wanted to make sure that employees knew was that we valued them from day one. What are the goals and the core values of the organization? And we wanted them to understand that, and I wanted them to understand that, so they would know that you didn't just join an organization just to work. Maybe you did, but I wanted to set the tone from day one, as you indicated, and made sure that they knew that they were valued and their experiences within those spaces were, individualized. We looked at them for who they are, and, they bring a contribution to the organization that is so important and valuable. And I wanted to make sure that they knew that from day one. So it sounds like that is what you believe as well, as far as a foundation for really embedding that from day one.
Absolutely, because you most often, right? I can't say for everybody, but I would think, especially in this field, in terms of education, people are here because they want to support, right? They want to work with students. They want to be part of this community. And so there's a reason that they're coming and choosing Auburn or Renton or Kent or whatever district, right? Or organization that supports educational instruction. So you want to continue to feed that, right? Like, you don't want to essentially sell them a bill of goods, right? You're not wanting to do that kind of take back on what the district is about or what the organization is about, and then they come and you don't retain them because you're not fully invested in what it is that you said that you were going to provide.
That's exactly what you see within organizations. If people don't feel like that they belong, or there really is a culture of this is how we support you, this is how we do
Mhm.
things, this is how we welcome you, then they often do leave. And I remember my grandmother used to always say, you know, your first impression is a lasting one. And even
Mhm.
for an organization, your first impression is a lasting impression for employees that either keeps them there or it doesn't, or it sets a tone for what they're expecting within the culture and the fabric of that organization. So I
Mhm.
absolutely would agree with that wholeheartedly. And you don't want to sell them a bag of goods. You do want to make
Mhm.
sure that you're being forthright and forthcoming with what they can expect and how they can be supported in that organization. But I think for sure we need to make sure, as you've indicated, that we are building that from day one.
Mhm.
And as you think about that, and as I think about that, do you or can you identify any pitfalls that standard onboarding has? You know, I know we onboard and everything, you know, we might have 25 or 30 people that we have to onboard, but what are some of those pitfalls that impact individuals who are coming into an organization, especially educators of color? Because we know I want to make sure people of color, educators of color, staff of color often feel marginalized and not part of that fabric. So what are some of those pitfalls that standard onboarding can do that can impact the success of an employee?
I think so. Probably the most important thing to me would be when we are treating it more as like a compliance piece,
Mm,
we are treating everyone as if they're coming from the same experience, the same life experience, the same backgrounds, right? The same culture, identities, and they're not, right? Like that's why it has to be so intentional and it has to be relationship based. And I think that's often the biggest disconnect is that we're missing the relationship piece. Which is interesting because, especially for us in education, we talk so much about when we're supporting our students that we're supporting the whole child, that we're making sure we're discussing and treating the social emotional learning. We've got, multi-tiered systems of support. We're addressing all right aspects that make that student successful, right? Or that would prohibit them from being their best self. But that doesn't necessarily extend to the adults, right, in our care. And they're in our care, and we should be treating them in that same vein, that we are looking at the whole staff member, that they do have things that come with them from the outside world, and how can we learn about that and work with that so that they feel like they are part of our family, right? Our work family. We have a pilot group of administrators that we're working with, to kind of dig into how our practices and systems impact BIPOC staff and students and families, of course, but a big thing is staff, right? Because we do so much and our focus is so much on our students and families, as it should be as a district. But again, then we miss our staff, right? Especially our staff of color. And one of the first things one of the facilitators said that really struck me was he said, your staff, your people should never feel like a stranger to you. And I feel like I really thought, like, I wonder how many people, how many administrators walk around in their building and maybe one of their staff members of color would say that they do feel like a stranger, like that the principal doesn't know anything about them. They don't feel connected to the building. They don't feel connected to their colleagues. They're just like in this insular little bubble, which doesn't make for a welcoming environment. So I think like the biggest thing is the relational piece, and that I think often gets missed in the day to day.
Well, you know what? You kind of led into like the last part of my questioning is what strategies are you using to kind of support, after the onboarding process has happened? How do we embed equity into those spaces? You've already indicated that you are piloting a program to where you are looking at leadership and trying to understand the experience of educators, especially educators of color, staff of
Mhm.
color, who are often marginalized in their spaces because, let's be honest, there's fewer of them within their organizational spaces than there are
Mhm.
other majority groups. So
Absolutely.
you are actually piloting a program to where you can get that information, you can gauge what that experience may look like, and be able to understand how to change it so that the equity is embedded and it's not
Mhm.
an add-on to
Correct.
what it is that's happening in the district.
Yeah, we say, right, it shouldn't be chequity. It
It should
needs to
not be
be, yeah,
equity.
right. It's the fabric, right? It should be in everything, woven through it all. I think, that is one of our strategies or a piece that we think can help us keep moving forward, right? Because it's never going to be a fully formed thing, right? It's always a work in progress, right? And we're all on a different journey with this. Certainly, we still have a lot of aspirations on where we need to be, right? But we're trying, and that is one of our steps. Another thing that we think about is having mentorship programs is important. They should be, again, purposeful, and they should be relational based. I think it's important for a staff member of color to feel that bond because, and I'll speak for myself, being Mexican, we are very community driven. We have, just that communal feeling around food and family and friends, and to then come into this other environment where that is completely separate is very hard, right? So there should be someone that is there to guide and support that staff member. So we often think about what kind of mentorship program can we have where we're identifying who's available, right? Who would be providing a safe space for that person, who understands the culture or the identity of that person, both maybe in the district or organization and outside of that, right? And somebody that would be able to check in regularly. Because I think that's what's missed too, right? And on with the mentors, right? Understanding that at least with us, we have some buildings that don't have a lot of staff of color, right?
Mm,
So being careful about who it is that we're, tapping because we don't want that emotional burden to be on that one person, right? Because then I feel like you're tokenizing them. Like it should be, um, and that isn't to say that they don't want to, right? But that's a strain,
of course.
right? So making sure that we're identifying multiple people, right? So then we can build that that bench, if you will. I think, like you said, right, embedding it, and it should never be an add-on, right? It should be always in the forefront, right? It should be constantly thinking about how we welcome people, how do we introduce people to our district, like how are we talking about our values and our mission, is that evident in our strategic plan and everything that we implement? Like, is it, are we basing it in curriculum too? So it's evident in every, fabric piece of our system. And again, like going back to are we seeing representation in admin and trainers and all of that? Like, is there a clear display of people walking in, again, particularly staff of color, they walking in and saying, oh, the district is saying all this, and I see it.
Exactly. Yes. And you mentioned beginning when we talk about onboarding and sharing with them what the organization is about, that is, our deliverables. Here's where you are, here's where you've landed. We hope you want to be here. And then having the opportunity to have mentors, but not having the strain on mentors of color, always having to take on 5, 6, 7, 8 people because there's not enough staff of color available. Being able to have that representation where we are building up a community that reflects, because you work in education, the students that you serve, and they can see themselves within that organization. And that lends to, like you mentioned, going from nurturing that student to also nurturing that employee, making sure that staff, especially staff of color who are often marginalized and fewer of the group, making sure that they have what they need to thrive. They're in position to feel valued and supported. And you also mentioned that some of the leaders may not even realize what's happening in their building. If you ask a staff of color, do you feel like this is a place where you can thrive, where you have the autonomy to make decisions? They may or may not be in a position to say yes. I know working in a school district previously, I held focus groups with staff of color. One year I did it with all CERT staff and I did it with all classified staff. And I learned that the reason that a lot of staff were there were not because they felt like they were part of that organization, but it was because of the students that they supported that made them feel that way. So I think you mentioned quite a few things that are important in looking at and making sure that we as organizations are embedding, which are mentorships, opportunities for your staff to be able to see themselves within those organizations and leadership. Do we have an opportunity to move up? Are we, if we desire to? Maybe I want to be where I am and maybe I don't, but do I have an opportunity to move up? So I think those things are absolutely important. Strategies and ways to embed that within the fabric of the organization.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned surviving or thriving, right? We always
Yes.
constantly say, right?
Yes.
We need to be thriving, not surviving.
We need to be thriving, not surviving. And when we are thriving, we want to do, we want to be, and we actually feel like we belong in the spaces that we are in. But if we're not thriving, we don't see ourselves growing in the work, then oftentimes we're leaving. We're not, or we're so exhausted that we're looking for the next thing because we don't feel part of that space. Before, we end this segment, is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience that I haven't asked already that you think would be important for them to know about embedding equity into the fabric of their organization from day one, that onboarding process with staff?
I think I would say that it should always be centered in equity, right, and inclusion and belonging, but that it's everyone's work. It's for me as a person of color working in HR, I can do so much, right? And it is a passion of mine to make sure that people feel like they belong here, that we want them here. But after they leave, working with me, what does that look like at the building level or the department level? It needs to be at the forefront of everyone's mind from the top down. It starts at the top. Like we do in classrooms, right? When, you're showing them what you're modeling, right? We should be doing the same in this case. And I think one of the other big thing is that we cannot shy away just because there is some level of discomfort. I think that is a quick response and it's like a knee-jerk reaction, but I always say that people of color don't get that choice. They don't get the option to step away because something is uncomfortable or there is discomfort in the day-to-day. We have to live through it. So it shouldn't be a choice for others. So that would be my big piece, that it should be a commitment, it should be a shared responsibility for everybody. And then I think in that case, it makes it more visible that we are intentional about this work.
Analia, thank you so much for those last thoughts because it should be an intentional part of the work we do. It should be part of the way that we show up. It should be
Mhm.
part of all aspects of all of our work, and it should be a shared responsibility. And so, as we think about some of our takeaways today, I want you all as listeners to think about reviewing your onboarding materials, reviewing your onboarding process, and think about how you can connect with your staff after they've been onboarded, making
Mhm.
sure, like Analia said, they started a pilot program to connect with leaders to see what that environment looks like for their staff once they get into the buildings. That is important. And
Mhm.
to make sure, as Analia stated, that staff feel welcomed. They are welcome to be, and it's a welcome for all, not a welcome for
Mhm.
some. And as we close, I want to make sure that you think about equity starts the day you walk through your organization's doors. It doesn't start after. And
Mhm.
so, Analia, thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate you so
Thank
much
you.
and your
Appreciate your time.
insight. Thank you.
Take care.